Hi, I'm Will Bruin, and I was just recognized as a Seattle Sounders legend. Now I get to do voice reads for the Sounder at Heart podcast network.
Here we go. Come on! Hey, O'Shan! Let's go!
The Seattle Sounders have done it! MLS Cup winners! The Sounders rule the region! Seattle Sounders is campeón! All creatures great and small.
Rothrock going to collect it. He does just about. Runs into the advertising awning. Low to our left. Ball goes in. Oh, what a cross! And what a goal!
Where's my copy?
I got a bunch of them in the car. I'll get you some.
You're handing them out for free already.
How many
cost on them?
$50.
I'll Venmo you.
This episode of Nos Arietes is sponsored by Full Pull Wines, a Seattle-based wine retailer and proud sponsor of Nos Arietes since 2011. Full Pull was founded in 2009, is based in Seattle, and is owned and operated by longtime Sounders supporters. They offer the best boutique wines of the world to members of their mailing list, with special focus on their home, the Pacific Northwest. Welcome back to another episode of Nos Arietes, part of the Sounder at Heart podcast network, sponsored by Full Pull Wines and our subscribers. We're recording on Monday, March 2nd, 2026. I am your host, Jeremiah Shan. I am once again joined by my co-host, Aaron Campo, and engineer Lickett. Well, the Sounders went to RSL, and like they have in each of the past 15 trips, they failed to win. I would say they were more competitive than they have been in a lot of those games. They probably should have been up 1-0, if not 2-0. But ultimately, they gave up the first and second goal, pulled one back, looked like they had an equalizer, but it was ruled offside correctly, I'll note. And once again, the Sounders have now gone 0-13-3 in their last 16 games at RSL. Aaron, I don't know if there's much to make of this other than the Sounders just cannot win at RSL.
Yeah, the last time the Sounders won a regular season game at RSL, I missed it because I was at my sister's wedding. And then 1 year later, my nephew was born, and he just started middle school this year. So, yeah. So that's, 15 years. I mean, 15 years. I was relatively svelte 15 years ago. I think I wore a size large or medium even sometimes. Barack Obama was president.
Yeah, we've had 4 presidential elections. I've had 2 kids.
Yeah, you've had 2 kids, right? Yeah, because
there have been 8 Olympics. There have been 8 Olympics since the last time the Sounders won.
Yeah, I mean, they did win a playoff game there.
Yes.
The next year. It's been, most of this stuff still holds true.
It's funny. Maybe this is me being naive, but honestly, if the Sounders had a playoff game at RSL, I would not be free. Like, I would give them a good chance.
Sure. I mean, I give them a good chance every week because I don't,
right.
I'm not a not every week, but every time they play in RSL, because I'm not a superstitious person.
I really thought this time though.
I did too. Yeah. I mean, it looked like as good an opportunity as they were going to get. RSL had a heavily rotated lineup. They had some injuries. Sounders looked great against Colorado. Unfortunately, it turns out some of those guys that rotated in can play, and
they sure can.
Yeah, I was impressed with RSL, man. I guess we can just dive in.
Yeah.
I thought that, the Sounders certainly did not play well enough to feel like they should have won or that, losing was an unfair result by any stretch. But I didn't think they played that poorly. They had some really unfortunate mistakes that were punished pretty harshly. They were not able to take advantage of similar mistakes by RSL. And, that's just the way it goes sometimes. But RSL, I thought, was legitimately very good. I was impressed with the young guys. I was impressed with their new DP striker that they brought on in the second half. I thought that change was one of the key things because, he comes into the game. The Sounders had been pretty dominant, looked like they might be getting an equalizer, and he comes on and instantly provides a threat that the Sounders now have to be conscious of. I thought he was really good. I thought Sanabria was really good. Cabral had a hell of a game, made 2 or 3 really great saves. And so, as frustrating as a result as it was, you would like to beat division rival or conference rivals home or away. You'd at least like to get a point. First game of a long stretch on the road. I think you'd like to get off to a little bit better of a start for, omen reasons, good omens and whatnot. But ultimately, there just wasn't anything in this game that I look at and say, I'm really concerned about that going forward. I think that the defensive lapses were regrettable, unfortunate, but I think that they're also sort of part and parcel with the style the Sounders want to play. They're just going to give up some opportunities like that. They need to execute a little better to make sure that they don't turn into goals. But you trade off some defensive security and some stoutness at the back for the kind of pressure the Sounders were able to put on RSL for a lot of the game. And, they just weren't able to execute when it mattered. And that sucks, but ultimately just not something I'm going to lose a lot of sleep over.
Well, let's dig in a little bit into some of those defensive miscues. The first goal, I think, is, there's a lot. I think you can identify a lot of mistakes in both goals. But the first goal really is a matter of a bunch of players Gozo essentially makes that goal where he breaks down a bunch of guys off the dribble. That kind of happens. But then Hassani Dotson has an opportunity to clear the ball, does not clear the ball. That restarts the sequence. And then ultimately, the goal scorer, Aiden, I can't remember how to say his last name, basically is allowed to just get open in like 12 yards out, and that someone needs to mark him. It's a great finish. It's a great ball, but there's just no way you can allow a professional soccer player to get a look like that inside the goal. And he finishes it well. It's not going to always, that's not always going to be a goal. It requires a fair amount of skill, but the problem there is there was a lot of defensive breakdowns. I don't expect that kind of thing to be happening all the time. You kind of just shrug your shoulders. Good job. The second goal is a little bit more one where I want to dig into this a little bit more, because there's a few on paper, when it happens, you almost go like, well, why isn't that happening all the time? I mean, it's not a particularly complicated sequence of play. It's their right back sends a ball over the top or their right center back sends a ball over the top to their right wing back, and he just beats Jackson Reagan for pace, which, that's going to happen. Jackson Reagan is not going to beat a lot of wing backs for pace. That's one of the trade-offs with Jackson Reagan. But what was really frustrating was first of all, Paul Rothrock does not close down the passer particularly effectively. Nuhu is sort of caught in no man's land. But really the thing that bugged me was Yamar has a head start on Pule, the ultimate goal scorer on this. And Pule just has he pulls away from Yamar almost the whole time. He also gets goal side on Yamar. Yamar is probably too far out to the right on this play to begin with. And so Pule makes a good run, and he's just there to tap in a really easy finish. I feel like this is one of those things that can be schemed away. Like you should be able to prevent this, though, just with scheming it out, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think that this is just a classic defensive breakdown where there's not an obvious mistake like with the first goal with the giveaway. Like, that's more a situation where the defensive structure is broken on that play because no one is expecting a pass to go directly to an RSL player in that situation.
Right.
This was just a lot of people being in the wrong place, making bad decisions at pretty critical times and just putting themselves in the worst position to deal with the danger. Because you're right, like you said initially, you would think that this would be a thing that would happen all the time because the Sounders play a very high line of confrontation. They were doing that in this game. RSL has some speedsters up front, but so do most teams, right? It's not like RSL is unique in having wingers with speed. And the Sounders just did not react well to the situation. Nuhu and Yamar both looked like they just kind of were assuming offside at a certain point and weren't really running super hard to chase the play. And Nuhu was also, I'm more frustrated with the center backs on this one because Nuhu was caught in a situation where he kind of has to stay with the trailing runner, because if he doesn't, then nobody's marking that trailing runner. So it's a difficult situation for him, but I do think that if he reacts a little quicker, he's got a pretty good, decent chance of cutting out the attack in general. And I think he just kind of got caught between decisions. But Yamar, I think, looks worse here in terms of chasing down the play. But I think Reagan was the one that was keeping the runner.
He was. So yeah, Reagan is like a full step or two deeper than Yamar to start the play, and if he's even with Yamar, it's probably offside.
Right. I mean, when I saw the goal, I said that's definitely coming back. There's that's got to be coming back. And no, I mean, they showed the replay and he was pretty clearly onside. So it's frustrating, and I think on a very tough day for Yamar, this was the worst and most consequential error, I would say. And yeah, it's an annoying goal to give up because the Sounders had been, I think, the much better team and looked very likely to equalize coming out of the break, and then they just get caught out in a way that they don't. They don't frequently get caught out that way. And again, you play a high line like that, you run the risk of that happening, but this was not an intricate counterattack. This was the most, textbook route one over the top ball you're ever going to see. And you shouldn't get broken apart that easily by a ball like that, by a counterattack like that.
Right. Exactly. I mean, I think that's the thing, is that the Sounders are going to defend this way. And, it's not like the Sounders were, I saw a lot of complaints about the Sounders center backs being too far forward on that. I mean, they're on the defensive side of midfield. It's not a particularly aggressive high, it's just like a modern high line. It's not even a particularly aggressive high line. And the Sounders also play very well for the most part, playing defensively like that. So I think it's kind of crazy to ask them to change the way they're defending because theoretically you don't have center backs who can run with this. They should be able to figure this out without dramatically changing the way they play. And then it was funny though, because at that point, those were really the two only good chances that RSL had up to that point in the game. And I think Andrew Thomas deserves some credit for keeping it from getting worse, because they had a couple more good looks. Their new designated player got out on a breakaway that Fry made a good stop on, that Thomas made a good stop on. And then I think Thomas made another good stop on a ball that their new DP9 put in for another runner. So, I think there was some, good moments from Andrew Thomas, at least defensively. But, the thing that I oftentimes find my frustration is tied to is how much offense the Sounders were able to create. And I thought they did a good job. I according to American Soccer Analysis, they had the 5th best away expected goal of any team this year. They definitely created plenty of chances. I don't think that can be really debated. Early on, the first big chance is that Yamar header where Jackson Reagan gets on a ball, cuts it back across the box, and Yamar really has the whole goal to look at, but he, it's a bang play. He ends up hitting it right at Cabral. What are you going to do? But that probably should be a goal. And then the next one is Albert Rusnak gets in on goal, has Cabral coming off of his line, and he gets a little unlucky that Cabral just sort of makes himself big and is able to keep the ball away. If either one of those go in, it's probably a different game. The Sounders are up 1-0. The Sounders, by the way, they haven't led at RSL since 2020. This is the first goal they'd scored at RSL since 2020. They haven't, I don't think they've led. Well, they obviously haven't led since then either. They did lead in that game, but it's and then they had a few more, good looks. Of course, they score when Christian Roldan puts his header past Cabral off of a really nice Albert Rusnak corner kick. It looked like they had the equalizer just a few minutes later. And at that, after the Christian Roldan score, it really felt like the Sounders were playing with some momentum. And it seemed like it all came good when Paul Rothrock crossed it to Danny Musovski, who volleyed it home. Unfortunately, Rothrock was about a step offside. And what's really frustrating about that is he didn't need to be. He didn't gain an advantage by being offside. He was just sort of not precise with his run. If he times that run a little bit better, it's not even about timing the run. If he's just, he's never really getting onside. If he is just better about getting himself onside there, that's a goal. I mean, as it is, he doesn't use the advantage of it at all. He doesn't have to. He allows Quentin to catch up with him. That's actually what plays Musovski onside, and he puts in a really nice cross, and Musovski makes a really nice finish, and it doesn't count, of course. And then they had one more really, really good look, and that was Snyder Brunell getting on the end of a volley on what was essentially the game's final play. He hits it really well, but he hit it right at Cabral. But look, I mean, that's five without. I mean, they had more, but that's 5 good looks on goal. And they got 1 goal out of it. I don't know. You kind of shrug your shoulders and, they had possession a fair amount. They, I thought for the most part, they attacked how you would want them to attack. And it just, it's one of those games where, we say this a lot, but it's one of those games where if it was just like a random opponent in the middle of the year, you don't really think twice about this loss because on paper that they didn't really do a lot bad. It's just that not being able to win at RSL sucks because
it really does.
It's just gone on for such an unbelievably long time.
Yeah, it has. And they haven't, it's not like most of this run is post RSL's heyday, right? Like,
yes.
If you had said in going into that game in 2011 where the Sounders finally won at RSL, I mean, RSL had what, like what I think is still
29 straight
the longest
unbeaten in league going into that game. It was a record. The Sounders broke their record home unbeaten streak.
So if you'd said, the Sounders are gonna get this win in this game, but then they're never gonna win again at RSL, you'd say, okay, I can see that they must have really established a dynasty. But no, they've been a pretty middling team for most of that time, and it's crazy. And I don't think it's anything other than random chance. I don't think that it's the Sounders' inability to play at altitude because they regularly beat Colorado. They've had success in Mexico at altitude before.
And all over Central America.
All over Central America, yeah. I don't think that it's a tactical thing because this goes back to...
It's like 5 different coaches, 6 different coaches. Yeah,
who all had very different tactical styles. The Sounders have had different coaches and different tactical styles. It's just one of those weird things. Although I wouldn't be shocked if there is at some point, at this point, some kind of like mental block, right, about going and playing at RSL.
But you look at who was in this game. Like Hassani Dawson doesn't have a mental block about it. Snyder Brunell doesn't have a mental block about it.
No, it's true.
A lot of the players who you would, expect to be
traumatized
we're not really even in this game. And what's funny is, I went back and read my story last year because I was like, what did I say about this game, this fixture last year? And I was reminded that it was actually similar circumstances. The Sounders were relatively healthy. They were coming off a resounding performance against Antigua. They were kind of flying high going into this game. They were on short rest, and they had another Champions Cup game the next week. So there was some of that, but then RSL had also just bombed out sort of embarrassingly in Champions Cup, and we're not looking very good. And then, of course, the difference last year is that the Sounders had this inexplicable own goal that knew who scored, but then they had other similar things where, Albert Rusnak scored, but it was offside in a similar way that Rothrock was offside, where Jordan Morris was just like kind of sloppy with his run and wasn't onside, but there was didn't really gain any advantage from it. And, you can kind of go, of course, there was the play where Georgie Manungu was so far offside and didn't need to touch the ball, disallowing a Jordan Morris goal. But point being that there were similarities to how it was last year, and it's just a ongoing streak that makes no sense. I mean, there's been a lot of games in this streak where the Sounders just looked like they were flat, and you could kind of buy into this idea that, well, there's something about what RSL is doing that is giving the Sounders trouble. I don't think that's what's been going on the last couple years, at least, where the Sounders just seem like they, it's just like dumb games that I don't think you learn. Like, I don't think we learned very much about the Sounders in this one. Like, they could go on and win their next 4 road games, and I would say, like, yeah, that makes sense.
Right. Yeah, I don't take anything away. It is what it is. It's a frustrating game. But I thought in the ways that I care about generally in terms of like the larger trends, there just wasn't too much to be concerned about. I mean, I would say I'm ready to see what Danny Musovski can do as the starting forward. I think that Dero earned the starts with his performances in preseason, and I don't think he's done a whole lot to earn continued starts. I'm still high on him. I still think he has a great future, but I'm ready to see what the guy that almost broke the single season scoring record last season can do. He looked, I thought, pretty good in his cameo. He put the ball in the net on a really nice finish, a really nice run. He had nothing to do with the offside goal there, and also had that really, really nice cutback where he just like fought off a couple of defenders, cut it back, and Cabral made a great save. That's one I hadn't really seen from him before. I didn't know he had that in his locker. So there are definitely things that I like more. Yeah, there are definitely things I like more about the way Dero plays and the hard work he does, the dirty work he can do that Musovski isn't quite as effective at. But you'd like to see your 9 getting a couple more chances than Dero has managed to find in the first couple of games.
Yeah, and I think it brings up a good question of did Dero ever win himself the number 1 job? I think he won himself some starts, but I think there is maybe some jumping to conclusions about where he was sort of depth chart wise. And for me, this was always almost as much about if Musovski was not 100% the last couple of weeks of preseason, and Osaze de Rosario is playing very well the way he did, hard to really do much there. But I won't be surprised if Danny Musovski is starting this week. And it's not necessarily a slight on de Rosario. It's more of a commentary that, look at this is the guy who scored 18 goals at striker last year for the Sounders. He wasn't, he hadn't really done anything to lose the job during preseason. If he's back starting, that's not a negative on de Rosario. De Rosario is going to get more chances. I assure you, he might get chances. He might get another start or 2. I don't know, but I don't know. I would not be at all. So I don't know what's going to happen. I think we'll know obviously more when we go back to training on Tuesday, but I think if Musovski starts, I am totally good with that. And I think he did sort of give us reminders of what makes him good, and that he makes a lot of dangerous runs. He's not flashy in terms of his hold up play. He's not, slinging dimes all around the field. He's not super fast, but man, he does a really good job of putting himself in dangerous spots. And, he finishes enough of them.
Yeah, I thought this was a great example of that. The goal that was called back, where he just kind of pops up out of nowhere. Like he's
Right.
he's making that great run. He makes space, and he's not an automatic finisher, certainly.
No.
But I think the days of us, wondering whether he's ever gonna be able to finish are well and truly over.
Yeah.
And I think that if you're getting a lot of goals from other players, how effective your 9 is at converting chances and creating chances isn't maybe as big of a deal. And the Sounders got a couple goals in the first game, but I mean, I think we did see why you'd like your number 9 to be a little more goal dangerous in this game, because the Sounders did have some fairly clear-cut chances that they weren't able to convert to put away. I think if Danny Masovsky is on the end of either of those, there's a very good chance they go in. So, I think that there are games where Dero is maybe the better fit. And I think once Jordan is healthy, that's a whole other conversation, especially if Paul Rothrock continues to play really well. But assuming he's ready to go 75 minutes or so, I'm ready for Moose, I think, next week.
One other sort of tactical change that happened within this game was Alex Roldan got moved to right center. The Sounders at some point moved to a 3 center back system, and they essentially brought in Kalani Kosa Rienzi for Yamar and then moved Alex Roldan back to right center back. I think there was a lot of folks that were wondering if that was a change that could herald, some other change, like that we might start seeing Alex Roldan playing center back even when you have a healthy Yamar. And I don't know, it could happen, but I don't think that's what's happening here. Brian Schmetzer was pretty clear that this was purely a tactical change that was responding to being down 2-0, and they just wanted more passers on the field. And, Alex Roldan, obviously a better passer than Yamar. And it did work pretty well. I think it's a nice change to have in your arsenal, to be able to sort of
for sure, yeah,
do that. I think is certainly helpful. The other personnel issue that I think a lot of people are going to be asking about is Hassani Dotson starting over Snyder Brunell. Dotson did have that really bad giveaway, but I'll note that he also made a really nice run to set up what would have been the equalizer. And, he kind of created most of the space that ended up being there, and allowed that play to open up. So I don't know. I also think Snyder benefits from the game state where the Sounders were really chasing the game by the time he got into the game. So it wasn't like he had to do a lot of two-way play. That said, I did like Snyder. I just don't think I don't think that we're really very close to seeing a change there.
Yeah, I would like to see Snyder more in even game states before I'm clamoring for Hassani Dotson to be replaced. And also, I mean, look, Hassani had a rough giveaway, not great overall on the night, but Yamar was pretty bad too. And he's one of the best center backs in MLS. Like, sometimes it just happens. And I do think that there was a tactical mismatch that really got exploited in the first half, where the midfield was just under a lot of pressure. I thought Hassani looked a lot better in the second half after they made the tactical adjustment and went to 3 center backs, and there was a little more support in the center of the pitch. And he's, he has a track record as a good player. I think he's probably got a pretty long leash. But Snyder Brunell, I think, has been impressive so far. I really like his game. He's a big, sturdy dude for such a young kid. He's got some adventure in him, which I like. He's got a little bit of an edge to his game, which I like. So I want to see more of the kid for sure. I think he could be a really good player. And I feel like this needs to be the year that he kind of starts to become a regular. But I think just saying, well, let's bench our, previous guy that has been an all-star in this league, who was one of the key components of a pretty good Minnesota United team for several years, and our biggest offseason acquisition. He made a bad pass, so let's put a kid in his place. I think that's maybe a little premature.
Yeah, and I'll also note that Snyder, at least when he first came in for the first 20 odd minutes that he was on the field, was really playing more as a right winger. I was a little surprised that Ferreira was one of the first players off. I don't know.
Agree, yeah.
I don't know what to read into that. I did not think Ferreira was particularly good or bad in this game, but Snyder did well in that spot. I think Snyder is a versatile player. I think he is definitely more of a central two-way type players, but he, to his credit, he did well in that more advanced role.
Yeah, I mean, if I was definitely confused as well, because I thought that Jesus had some uninspiring moments, but I thought that he had some really nice moments of vision, and I thought that you want some people that can unlock this defense, because RSL is content to sit pretty deep. But what RSL really started struggling with defensively was guys just kind of coming right at them. Like, they weren't too bothered by silky attacking play or clever through balls, but they were worried about guys running down their throats. And that was what was really causing them to start to scuttle a little bit. And Snyder Brunell is a very willing runner. He's willing to run right at guys. He's willing to take guys on. And he's going to go towards goal if that's his remit. And in hindsight, I think that maybe that was the thinking there. And it's hard to, I think, argue with the results to some degree, because I thought is immediately after the change, the Sounders looked quite a bit better in both phases of the game, frankly. And, really until they ran out of steam, I thought that they looked pretty likely to score. But that's a really high level of intensity to keep playing at, especially at elevation. I mean, I think if there was a place where the elevation was a factor, I think chasing the game for that long had to be it. But but I liked how Snyder looked on the right. Like, I was kind of confused by that decision to play him there. I've only ever seen him play centrally, as far as I'm aware. And I thought he looked pretty comfortable. He's not a conventional winger by any stretch of the imagination, but he can certainly be effective there if the game state calls for it.
And he has a nose for goal. Like, he has a nose for popping up in dangerous spots. He has good instincts. He's going to be a good player. I have no doubt about that. He continuously impresses when he gets on the field. I think one of my other ongoing frustrations for this game is Paul Rothrock beat Philip Quentin probably 15 times off the dribble. It felt like, I mean, it did feel like he was beating him every single time he needed to, and it was all over the field. And what was frustrating is how little came of it. Like, there was, he drew some fouls. He drew a yellow card very early on, and you kind of would have liked to have seen him just kind of go after him a little bit more. But as it was, he kind of had a quiet game, even though he was consistently beating his man and creating some space for himself. But then there was just no, he ended up going 4 for 8, I guess, on dribbles, and there was just no final ball really, other than the assist that he had where he was offside. But I think right. I wanted to see Paul do a little bit more with sort of all the opportunities he gave himself. Reward yourself. You did the hard work. You beat your man, and then he did. Yeah. He drew a couple good free kicks too. So it wasn't like it was all for nothing. It just felt like one of those things where you want to see more come out. If you're beating your man off the dribble that much, it feels like there should be more end product.
Yeah, you want to differentiate yourself from Georgie Manungu a little bit, I think.
Right, yeah.
Because, if all you're going to be doing is beating your man, and then there's not going to be too much final product after that, then Georgie's going to give you a much larger sample for something random to happen. But
right.
I thought that I agreed with you. It was a little frustrating because a lot of the mistakes that RSL was making earlier that I wish the Sounders had taken advantage of were the result of that really hard work from Paul Rothrock. And I think that he puts in a better ball in, a couple of those situations, and it's probably a much different game. Because I think if the Sounders score first, it's, most obvious thing in the world, right? But if the Sounders score first, it's a much different game than the one we ended up seeing. And because they don't have to chase for
right.
60 minutes, they can get a little more comfortable and set and play a little deeper. And I think that that's the thing that differentiates the Paul Rothrock that we have and that we're happy to have, and the Paul Rothrock that I think everybody wants him to become, is being a little more consistent and being able to finish the play.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, now we go on to St. Louis. The Blues. Oh, they're not the Blues. They're St. Louis City. They are looking maybe a little better than they were last year. The Sounders have done all right in this fixture in the past. They have only lost to St. Louis once. They lost last year 1-0 on sort of a kind of an ugly game. But this has not been, it's not been the worst place for them. But so far, St. Louis is 0-1-1. They tied their first game. They lost this they lost on Sunday to San Diego. Not a team that should strike fear into the Sounders, but a team that is capable of certainly giving the Sounders trouble, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this is a game you really have to feel pretty disappointed if you don't get a result here. Not necessarily a win, but losing this game would feel very bad. RSL, I think, was a game people thought the Sounders would have a pretty good chance to win out of this run of road games. And I think they ended up being a little better than people expected.
Yeah.
Like I said earlier, I was legitimately impressed with them. I thought that they earned the win. They deserved the win in that game. St. Louis, I don't think there's going to be any real surprises there. And the games are not going to get easier from here on out. They've got Vancouver after this one. They've got a San Jose team that looks like they, might actually be pretty dang good. And which is, not shocking, but maybe a little bit surprising. They've got a Minnesota team who I think is going to be reasonably tough to play against on the road. So this is their best chance to get 3 points.
Yes,
out of the remaining road games for sure. So, and I think it's going to be really disappointing if they come away with nothing.
Yeah, all winnable games, but also tougher matchups than this one is. For all the reasons that you said. I mean, this is the game I think the Sounders really have to circle as their best opportunity to get 3 points out of this road trip. And hopefully they can turn that into some momentum. Of course, they have the Whitecaps. They'll start Champions Cup a week from like next week. So that'll be between that further complicates the San Jose game, I guess, as well, because they'll be coming off the Whitecaps game, and that's the San Jose game is sandwiched between two CONCACAF games against the Whitecaps. So yeah, this is the game the Sounders need to be focused on as their best opportunity.
Yeah, no question. Yeah. And if you get 3 points from this one and a couple more draws, I think it's not a great road trip, but it's not a disaster. If you don't get 3 points from this one, you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself to have to get 3 points from better teams.
Yes,
and
I would agree with
that's not a good situation to be in. So
I would totally agree with that. We're not in disaster. There's not going to be any disasters here, but this is,
of course not.
If they want to make a run, this is the kind of game you have to figure out how to get points from. So and ideally win. If they think they're going to contend in the West, they've got to you got to find some road wins, and this is one where it feels like you gotta be looking for it. Well, I think that's what we got today. We are going to do a second segment of the show. I talked to John Morrissey of USL Tactics. It was actually, we recorded it before the start of the Tacoma Defiance season, but we are, getting around to publishing it now. I think it's all still very relevant information. Hopefully you enjoy that. And in the meantime, we'll take a break. We'll come right back with John Morrissey of USL Tactics and Backheeled. You're listening to Nos Arietes. Sounder at Heart has been around in one form or another since 2009. In 2026, though, we make a pretty significant evolution when we go analog. Yes, that's right. In the year of our Lord 2026, we are publishing a real-life magazine. We're calling this thing 4, as in Sounder at Heart 4.0, but we're stylizing it as IV because we absolutely love Roman numeral. And if you want to refer to it as IV, that's cool too. The first issue has a comic book style cover that was hand-drawn by local artist Kevin Newber. Features by Tim Foss, Susie Rance, and Charlie Boehm, a statistical deep dive by Kat Bush, a Q&A with Brian Schmetzer, a column by G. Willow Wilson, and photographs by Noah Reif, Max Aquino, Mike Russell, and Jane Dershowitz. I could not possibly be more proud of the work everyone put into making this, and I think you're going to absolutely love it. If you'd like to get your hands on one of these limited edition copies, we're currently selling them for $15 on our website. Get yours now. Nos Odietes, admittedly, is not exactly known for our spicy takes, but that doesn't mean we want our food to be mild. Spice up your life with Hacks and Ferments. Handcrafted in Georgetown and made with the best local ingredients from across the Pacific Northwest, they specialize in unique small batch fermented hot sauces and vinegars. Hacks and Ferments brings bold flavors and natural fermentation together for something truly special. Whether you're a heat seeker or just looking to elevate your cooking, you'll find something you love at hacksandferments.com. That's HAXANFERMENTS.com. And right now, if you use the code Sounder at Heart, that's all one word, at checkout, you will get a free hot sauce with your order. Again, go to hacksandferments.com, use the code Sounder at Heart at checkout for a free hot sauce with your order. Hacks and Ferments is a proud sponsor of the Sounder at Heart podcast network. Welcome back to another episode of Nos Odietes on the Sounder at Heart podcast network. We are trying something out new here. We are doing sort of a dual thing with Lobbing Scorchers that includes video. And joining me on our first sort of dual thing here is John Morrissey of Backheeled. Welcome to the show. We're here to talk USL and sort of the convergence of USL and MLS and MLS NextPro. And welcome to the show, John. I've been a longtime reader. I'm thrilled to have you on.
No, I mean, appreciated what you guys at Sounder at Heart have done for a long time. So happy to be here.
Yeah, it's kind of a funny thing. All of a sudden, the Sounders seem very interested in signing players from USL. I don't know how many USL players they have had at all, but all of a sudden they have signed, or the Tacoma Defiance have signed 3 players from USL this offseason. I'm probably going to butcher some of these names, but Rafa Urenge? We'll go with that.
I say Rafa Waregi, but
Waregi, there we go.
I don't know much better.
I like your pronunciation better. That was today. He's coming from Charlotte Independence in Sacramento Republic. He is what, a wing back? Is that what I understand?
Yeah, wing back, winger, a little bit of flexibility. Yeah.
Okay, and then Mark Bronick. I'm pretty sure I nailed the pronunciation of that one.
You got it.
And Xavi Nalati.
Boom! You're getting better with these.
And so he comes from Monterey Bay FC, which is a USL championship team, so a rung above the other two, which came out of League One. Just generally speaking, do you? And then we've seen. I feel like more players going from USL to both MLS NextPro and MLS this offseason. Does this feel like a pipeline that is finally starting to open up?
Yeah, and I hope that is the case. You think about particularly some of these prospect type of players that Tacoma has tried to go for this offseason. These are guys that want to be playing at the higher levels. You think about someone like a Bronick, who comes on the scene as a teenager with Union Omaha last year. A little bit of a role player starter, halfway between type, but I think he got 6 goals, elite on the dribble, really good right foot. You could just look at him and see immediately he's above the level of USL League One. Well, then what is the potential for him? Could it be MLS? The best way for someone in that situation to probably push up the pyramid a little bit is get into NextPro, get directly into the MLS pipeline and see what you can do. And from the MLS side, increasingly, I think teams, if you're looking for a starting level player, looking for a star, You might look overseas. You're spending a lot of money to try to get those players in. I mean, the most expensive transfers you've ever seen out of League One, $50,000, $75,000. The relative level of cost to take a flyer on a couple guys from the USL, and that's if you're paying a transfer fee. Some of these guys are coming for free. It really is an economical solution on that side of things.
Right. And especially for an MLS NextPro team to be doing that. And I thought it was interesting, both in the cases of Nulati and Bronick, the teams they left from made a particular note of saying a transfer. There was some amount of money exchange. I think in Bronick's case, Union Omaha actually said that his exit clause or his release fee had been met. And I'm just like, what is the release fee for a League One level player? I mean, like you said, like $50,000 seems like that might be like a high number.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with someone like a Bronick also is that he's not exactly coming out of Nebraska, rising through the academy. He grew up in Brooklyn. He was in the Barca Residency Academy. This is an example of Omaha spotting this kid late in his teenage years, saying, we think we can give you the finishing touches. And then if you get any amount of money for him, that's a bonus.
Sure.
That feels like what Omaha was trying to do all along. So the fact that he has an exit clause, he was probably the only player on the roster that had one of those.
Right. And then Nulati, they said was if I'm pretty sure the language they used was a significant transfer fee. And I remember I asked someone with the Sounders, like, well, what does that mean? Like a couple $100,000? And they sort of like laughed and they said, I mean, that would be a significant transfer fee. But it sounds like from talking to you, that probably is not the number. Like we're talking a much smaller number, most likely, right?
Yeah. So like last week, for instance, there was a starting level goalkeeper in the championship that got sold for less than $10,000.
Oh,
that's what you can probably anchor your estimates off of. And that is different with someone like Xavi Nulati, who is young and has the upside. I think he just turned 21. But yeah, it's going to be a meager amount of money for a guy that has significant professional experience against grown men, which you can't always say about the average NextPro prospect.
Absolutely not. I mean, the Defiance just signed a whole bunch of they in the last 3 days, they have signed, I believe, 9 players, and at least 4 of those players were sort of like not like we're out of college, but sometimes even a year removed from college, who clearly were just sort of, that's sort of like the amount of quality on a MLS NextPro roster ranges a lot, I guess is what I'm saying. It's like you have guys that are really there just to sort of like fill out numbers for training. And then you have, potential stars like a Georgie Manungu was playing in MLS NextPro as recently as last year. And now, he's being mentioned as potentially like a $3 million transfer.
Yeah. And I mean, that is why you can say like, okay, cool. We're going to fill out many of these roster spots with the post-college kids, the guys who we just need for numbers. If you've got the budget to say, sweet, we're going to drop 50,000 total on 3 players coming from the USL, maybe there's potential there. And even if it's not becoming the $3 million man, maybe there can be first team minutes down the line. Worth the gamble every time. And it is something, like you kind of mentioned up top, that I think other organizations, if they aren't wise to that now, are swiftly going to start following the same pathway.
You would think so. So of these 3 players, I get the impression from you that Bronick is like the highest level, like his ceiling is the highest.
That's exactly the phrase I was going to use, and kind of mentioned it, but it was kind of working off the left wing last season, inverted. So he's primarily right-footed, very good beating defenders one-on-one, kind of a triple threat in that you think he can thread a teammate in on a through ball. He's a decent shooter. He has the dribbling skill. There's a real intensity in the press just by nature of what Omaha was asking him to do. So he's going to be responsible defensively from day one. He's the kind of prospect where it's just hard to poke a hole in his game. And I think that's why scouts and certainly the people around the Sounders organization came away impressed with him.
And there is one of the other things I would imagine is helping League One and MLS Next Pro to a degree is that there are now advanced analytics that are available for these players, that it's not just some grainy tape that they're passing around. It's like, oh no, we actually have data on these guys that gives us all kinds of different information. And if I remember correctly, you shared some information about several of these players that suggested there might be something here.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Bronick, 97th percentile XG per 90 minutes, 94th percentile for final third regains. So that's evidence of the pressing skill.
Mm-hmm.
He, as a teenager, did that in the league against grown men. And I keep emphasizing that, but it shows like he was above the level that you would expect in the ways that advanced stats backed up and the eye test backed up.
And then the position that we didn't get into this. Naladia sounds like they sort of envision him as an 8. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah, he's struggled to settle down into a real consistent role in the USL. Like I think he's a San Diego guy, and he came through with San Diego Loyal when they were still around.
Mm-hmm. That sounds
there,
right.
He kind of tended to just be late game, super sub. Let's see what energy you can give us off the bench, and that just projected him forward a little bit. Monterey tried to use him as an 8, and he had some moments of progressivity. He has that kind of buzziness where he just finds touches, keeps the ball moving. I think there is a little bit of room to grow technically for him, but he's got that something that you can't really teach, and you just see it. Like, he knows how to move the ball forward in pretty useful ways consistently.
And so one of the other players to come out of USL this year is Calera. Is that how you say
Yeah, Taylor Calera.
Yeah. His numbers really do jump off the page. He scored a ton of goals, but it wasn't just the goals. I mean, his receiving numbers are very impressive. His XG numbers were very impressive. And he's someone that Sporting Kansas City, I believe, signed, I want to say for $250,000 or something like that. That seems to be like an even bigger sign that MLS is starting to take the achievements of USL Championship players pretty seriously.
Yeah, and for the longest time, that really hasn't been the case. If you saw someone go up, it would be they were a free agent in the USL. Mm-hmm. They probably had to wait until kind of deep in the offseason for an MLS team to say, oh, we need some depth and we're going to call on a USL player. And Calera, to be fair, just moved in February to a team that kind of delayed their roster build. But still, the fact that he goes in, spends 1 year with FC Tulsa, which hasn't been a traditional springboard for players to either Europe or MLS, but doing what he did, I think he led the league in aerial duel attempts as well. So like he's putting his body on the line all the time. It is what you want to see for this pipeline going forward.
And do you feel like the USL Championship right now sees itself in that pipeline, or is it more of a, we want to be providing, value to fans and like the development part is separate?
I just did a piece for Backheeled where I talked to the folks at Orange County and at the Charleston Battery, because they are really at the forefront of that selling club mentality. And I think Orange County has become a story because of it. Every single season, they've got a U.S. youth national team prospect that they're either moving.
It's
to
sort
MLS.
of their brand now.
Absolutely. And they financially benefit from that because they just have a revenue stream that no one else has. It's also become a way to get more attention on their senior players as well. You think about Milan Alaski, who has gone to Europe, now come back to MLS to be a starter at that level. They sold a midfielder over to England last regular season. In Charleston, Nick Markanek goes overseas. Now he's back with the Houston Dynamo. There are clubs that increasingly, while still trying to do what you expect with the fan relations and all that, are becoming wise to the ability to be a selling club within this spot in the ecosystem.
And, you had another piece today in Backheeled that looked at sort of another angle on the USL business. And I don't know, it certainly wasn't a secret that the USL operated sort of everything and that the teams were essentially paying a license to play in the USL system. But I thought you did a really good job of illustrating exactly how that works and how, teams play, already are paying $25 million apparently to get into the USL championship. And that's money that just kind of goes into the USL coffers. And unlike MLS, where you have where you're buying into like a 1/30th equity stake of the league, there's no equity stake being given to the individual teams in USL, and the USL sort of operates things and they run the broadcasts and they run the websites and they do some of the other stuff like that. But ultimately the teams sink or swim entirely based on what they're doing on the local market.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're kind of right to frame it around this idea of it's 25 million and then the teams are on their own to a large extent. There is no revenue sharing. And I think that is something that people take as a given when they think about professional sports in this country. Like if your league has $100 million coming from a network, that will get divided amongst the teams. And that just isn't true of the USL. And that applies to expansion fees, sponsorships. It really just stays with a privately owned company, USL headquarters in Tampa Bay. So when you project that out, you see South Georgia Tormenta folding over the weekend in USL League One. That's an organization that paid their fees and then couldn't figure it out, and they're going away. You saw Texoma FC in League One last year. That was a team based in the 418th biggest city in America. That's great that you want to put soccer in Sherman, Texas. But if you're paying $10 to $15 million to get into League One, that isn't a viable project financially. And they fade away after one single season. So if you're the USL, you have this incentive. Let's get the one-time check. Let's bolster what we've got going at HQ. Does there need to be a safety net for the rest of these teams? Yes. Is the USL actually providing it? I think that's increasingly debatable.
And so, I as someone who comes from the Bay Area, I also worked in Monterey for a while. I remember being sort of blown away that Monterey was going to have a USL championship team. This does not strike me like Monterey is a great town, but it's a small town. I mean, it's something like 28,000 people live in Monterey. Now it's a tourist hub a little bit, and it's part of a larger community. But I was struck by the USL going to a relatively small town like that. And it is it's somewhat isolated in that, you're an hour and a half away from San Jose, which is certainly the big city relative to there. And I'm just curious, does that seem like, do you feel like when USL Premier launches that this is going to exasperate some of these gaps? Because, I love the idea of there being big markets and small markets in any league like this. But, we're talking about New York playing in the same league as a Monterey. Like, these are big gaps.
You're absolutely right to make that point. If you think about the spending in the USL right now, yes, there are gulfs, but how different is $1.5 million in salary versus $3 million?
Right.
Ultimately, not that much.
Right.
When you're talking about a first division club, let's say it's Louisville or Sacramento, in a bigger city relatively, with a nice downtown stadium that is creating its own revenue streams. And then you've got Monterey Bay FC in a tiny community owned by literally a used car salesman. They just aren't going to be able to keep up with that high-powered thing. You throw in the pro rel aspect of it, and suddenly you've got part of the USL ecosystem that is taking off in a lot of ways. Is the rest of it going to get left behind? Yes. Meanwhile, USL headquarters is going to get $150, $200 million in new expansion fees. That's what they are intending to do with USL Premier. Everything that we've seen cyclically just repeats itself at a greater magnitude.
And so I know that there's not a lot of details out there about how any of this is going to work, but do you have any sense at all how I like every American soccer fan love the idea of promotion and relegation. There's a purity to it. I don't think I need to sell anyone on the idea of it. But I do when you start seeing it play out in reality, there does seem to be a potential unsettling factor that will happen, because one of the great things that I have seen, even in the time since I've been watching, paying really close attention to American soccer, is that when I first started watching American soccer, the first division was, MLS was relatively stable, but the lower divisions were chaotic. And over the last 10 years or so, there's been a real settling in the lower divisions where there, teams fold and teams come in every year, but there's no existential crisis for the most part for the existence of lower leagues in America. And there are more teams, more professional teams in the United States now than there has ever been. And it seems very hard to imagine even going serious backsliding. But you can also see a world where all of a sudden you have this new USL premiere, and there has to be some concern, maybe not of the USL, but of American soccer fans, that there could be this, what has become a relatively stable foundation could become destabilized.
Yeah, I mean, you think about the phrase "a race to the bottom," kind of the opposite, where these clubs are going to be encouraged by this possibility of getting to USL Premier when they aren't financially stable in the first place. Where does that leave you economically? I was actually talking to a League One owner today relative to the Tormenta situation, and he was basically saying you have to invest and hope that you're going to make money down the line. You need to have like full ticketing infrastructure in your front office. You need to invest in the stadium experience to keep people coming back. That's well and good, but when do you actually reap the reward? I think for a lot of these organizations, the idea has been, cool, we're going to wait it out until we get Premier, till we get Pro Rel. Then there's going to be this trickle-down effect where people care about the USL. They're engaged by the narrative of promotion and relegation. Whether that happens or not, I think is highly debatable. The smart organizations aren't banking on it, and they are building stadiums with their own private money, with real estate around it that they can develop and turn into a separate revenue stream. But I think it's going to be a rude awakening in a lot of ways, which could have deleterious effects like you're kind of getting at.
Yeah, I love the idea of a Eugene, working its way up to USL Premier, but there's also this concern of what, is that of what that actually looks like in reality. I mean, we have another situation here in Seattle where we have Everett is potentially getting into the USL market. I don't imagine, I'm guessing you don't get too deeply involved in any one expansion market, in part because there are so many potential expansion markets in USL that you drive yourself crazy if you were trying to follow all of them.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it seems like every other week the USL is engaging in talks with another city or something to that effect. And no offense to the good people of Everett, but I don't know the ins and outs.
Yeah, no, I don't blame. I can't find out much stuff, and I'm on the ground here, so I can only imagine what it's like for you. I am curious. One other thing. What do you imagine? How do you imagine USL 2 sort of fitting into the broader pyramid? Because it's not technically connected to the broader pyramid, but there does seem to be in the people I've talked to at USL 2, there seems to be this sort of maybe not literally articulated, but there's this idea that it's like there's sort of a proving ground for viability so that they might potentially go professional. And I'm wondering if you really think that's a realistic thing, or if the USL 2 will probably be even more separate once this pyramid gets formalized.
I think in some cases it definitely can be a proving ground. And this year is going to be a great example where League One is adding the Sarasota Paradise, Fort Wayne FC, Corpus Christi FC, organizations that got their feet wet in League Two, kind of proved the viability, and now are trying to get the leap. And Fort Wayne especially, like they figured out, we think this can be feasible. They used that launching pad to get investment in line. They're opening a 9,000 seat stadium in accordance with the jump up. Wow. That to me is what every team trying to move from League Two to League One should be.
Yeah.
But I think League Two is a lot of things to a lot of different people. In some cases, it really is small potatoes, and you're just trying to do something fun for the soccer community in a given city. In some cases, there's maybe a social cause. I think something like Vermont Green kind of blends a lot of these worlds. And of course, there is the component of owners that want to see, what can we do with the USL? Let's start this relationship. Then maybe we go pro down the line. But in the pro rel context, if it is this kind of tide that raises all ships, you have to imagine the gap between this semi-professional summer-only League Two and League One is only going to grow larger and larger over the years.
But I guess from the USL perspective, they don't see any like from the USL league office perspective, USL 2 must just be, a pure numbers play where you can, you have literally hundreds of teams in USL 2 playing in these regional leagues. And then it is kind of amazing. Like Ballard FC seems to be doing something very similar to Vermont, where they've created a real community around this neighborhood team within Seattle. And it's funny, whenever I talk to them, they seem very clear-eyed about the challenges of potentially going pro, and are kind of like, look, we have a good thing going here. I don't know why we need to go pro, other than just, wouldn't it be fun to try it? But like from a business perspective, they go, it's kind of fun being they have a really good, they've put together some good teams, but in a lot of ways they are sort of like a fashion brand, almost like they put out these cool jerseys. People get really excited. They go out to games. They have a good time for the summer, and then they go away and they come back next summer.
Yeah, and that's the clarity of vision that I wish every team in League Two had, like just knowing where you want to be and how large you want to be. Because there have been bad examples of teams trying to take the leap up the pyramid and then failing because of it. I think for now, the USL definitely sees League Two as a proving ground first and foremost. Long term, the goal is to get League One up to 80 teams in a kind of 4-region format. And a heck of a lot of those are probably going to be League Two teams that are just deciding to make the jump. Long term, even beyond that, I don't know what League Two becomes. We'll probably all be dead by the time that happens.
Yeah.
If we ever get to 80, but it's wild to think about.
It is wild to think about. It is kind of the scale of what needs to happen for the USL pyramid to really work out is pretty stark. Right now, what are there 50-ish professional teams in the USL in the USL pyramid? And to get really built out, they would have to probably be at 130 or something, right?
Yeah, essentially, and it's hard to separate what is bluster for a press release and trying to drum up excitement versus the actual game plan. But I think there is something earnest about the USL wanting to add 40 to 80 more organizations.
Right.
And the amount of work and investment that's going to take is nothing to scoff at.
Yeah. I don't know. It's a fascinating thing to be watching right now. And of course, I think we just learned that NISA got their classification pulled, essentially, right?
Yes, and I think the NASL finally got decertified.
Oh yes, you're right. The NASL did finally get decertified too. So, the USL, to their credit, the USL has come out of this looking, in a better place. And I know there was a lot of consternation over when MLS 2 went, and I actually appreciated your story mentioned this about how the MLS putting their reserve teams in the USL really was a stabilizing force. And I know that there was a time when, where clearly USL had outgrown that part of their model. And I think going their separate ways has probably been good. But if you're looking into your crystal ball, do you think MLS NextPro and USL are destined to sort of face off? Or do you think they can continue sort of on these parallel paths where they just, the MLS NextPro does not seem to me to be it seems much more purely developmental and much less consumer focused, whereas USL is a much more consumer focused and less, less part of the pipeline, the developmental pipeline.
Right. Yeah, I broadly think that they aren't going to be in major competition. And will there be expansion cities and markets that they bicker over, of course, and particularly if NextPro continues to add more independent organizations. I think Baltimore is an interesting case where DC United is going to be putting a team there. That felt like one of the real gems left of major cities that don't have a pro soccer team. But how many more Baltimores are there? Probably not many. So is it something that could stand in the way of future League One markets that get picked off by the stray independent NextPro organizations? Maybe. Could NextPro really start to be a muscular presence in the youth world that kind of steps on the USL toes there? That feels like more of a potent threat, but maybe not something that's going to come to blows in any real way. And maybe I'm too rose-tinted with this, but I think that they can be pretty symbiotic with one another.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been pretty skeptical that MLS NextPro, at least in the short term, looks at as the USL as that. They look at them like they just don't really. They're doing a different thing. Like I know there are examples of markets where they are kind of going head to head, and there's some real sense of conflict. But for the most part, I don't get the sense that they're in that sort of conflict. But I don't know. Maybe that could change. I suppose at some point MLS would like MLS NextPro to be more commercially viable than it currently is. We just saw that they signed a broadcast deal with OneFootball, so the games are going to be more reliably available in one place than they have been in recent years. But I don't know. I'm fascinated by the whole sort of lower division scene. John, you do as well of a job, if not you're doing probably the best job of anyone really covering this. I love reading you. I make a point of reading almost everything you put out on Backheeled. So I just want to say thanks for coming on. And I oftentimes use this space as an excuse to meet interesting people. And that was just putting cards on the table. That was the main reason I wanted to do this. And you delivered by being interesting. So thank you for coming on.
No, an absolute delight. I will say, like, my grandparents used to live in Seattle, and when I kind of dipped my toes into MLS as a guy getting into soccer, was religiously reading the site. You guys have done tremendous work.
That's awesome.
No, seriously, you guys have done tremendous work for years. So yeah, happy to be here.
Oh, awesome. Well, I am really, really happy to hear that. John, you can follow John on it's USL Tactics on Blue Sky, right?
Yes, that's right.
All right, great. Well, thank you for doing this. And you're listening to No Sadieta as part of the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network, and we'll be back in a bit. Well, thank you to John Morrissey for giving us his time like that. It was obviously he's someone I've wanted to have on the show for a long time. I love reading his stuff. But yeah, I guess before we get out of here, I will just send out a note. We still have copies of For the Sounder at Heart magazine. If you ordered yours and you have not yet received it, we're at the point now where something may have happened. So I would urge you to get in touch with me. Just send me an email, support@sounderatheart.com, and we will get you all squared away. I've sent out a few replacements. I'm happy to do it. It's not, I apologize if you, especially were one of the early order people and you didn't get one. I feel bad about it. But that's the USPS for you. We sent out 1,200 pieces of mail through a bulk order. A handful of them probably were never going to get there. That's just sort of the way these things go. The loss rate on USPS is not what it used to be, unfortunately. But if you have not received your magazine yet, please get in touch. If you want to get one, though, they are still available. They're $15. We're going to be working on maybe getting them into some stores. We might even be able to sell them at Sounders games. Fingers crossed on that one. We'll see. But thanks to everyone who has bought one. Thanks to everyone who has supported Sounder at Heart. Thank you to our sponsors, Full Pool Wines. And I guess that's what I'll sign off with. I am Jeremiah Shan, saying farewell for Aaron Campo and Lickett. This is No Sadietas. Remember, you'll never get alone.
job. Let's go Sounders. Yeah.